We begin the news in West Africa, where global rights group Amnesty International has knocked the Nigerian military accidental bombing that killed over 85 villagers and injured several others at Tundumbiri village in the Igabi local government area of Kaduna State on Sunday. The rights group described as unacceptable the persistent unlawful killings of civilians by military airstrikes. Amnesty accused the Nigerian military of cover-up and demand that justice be served on the matter. Amnesty said President Bola Tinubu's administration must set up an independent inquiry into the recent airstrike and ensure that those responsible are brought to justice in fair trials. Amnesty said airstrikes with deadly consequences for civilians are becoming routine and the ugly trend must be stopped. And joining me to talk about this is a security expert, Emmanuel Ikule. Good morning, Emmanuel. Glad to have you join me.
Good morning.
Now, Emmanuel, what's your reaction to the stand of Amnesty International describing this incident as unacceptable?
It's a sad reality in our country that life gradually is losing its worth. That is why it's so easy for citizens to be murdered daily, and we give flimsy excuses like it was a mistake, something went wrong on operations, and then lives are being lost daily. It's actually sad. It's worse when it happens. About 100 persons are killed, and the first news we got, or one of the first persons we got, were people posting on Twitter. It goes to show how much life has lost its worth in the country. And the federal government, not even, yes, the military came later to talk about it, but they, at least the government of the day should at least should have come out earlier to talk about it, and at least for it to be like a consolation to the families that have lost their loved ones. But that didn't happen, as always the case. And as long as this trend continues in the country, no one is safe. That means
Emmanuel,
even as we are talking.
Emmanuel, if I may, I mean, like you rightly mentioned, this also is not the first time such accidental bombing or miscalculated airstrike or intelligence mishap, whatever name we choose to call it, is happening in Nigeria. It's been recurring. History tells us that we had a case of over 300 civilians killed in accidental airstrikes in Borno State. And also in 2022, at least 27 people were reportedly killed in Kwateri, a community between Benue State and Nasarawa State. Also, a similar accidental bombing happened in Kaduna State, still in 2022, and killed about one person, and 13 others were reported to be injured. How do you think we can put an end to these misfiring?
Okay, there are many ways to put an end to it, but outside even those number of places that you have mentioned, it has happened even worse. In Benue, it happened twice, more up to 3 times. The issue is this: when something happens once and nobody is being brought to book, it happens twice and nobody is held accountable, it becomes a normal thing, and that has been the case. There's something behind that a lot of persons don't know. There's an issue, or there are issues involved, or issues around military interventions in different states. And as long as people coordinating these operations are not brought to book for failure or failing to ensure safety of lives, but instead murdering people that they should be protecting, they should be held accountable from the people in charge. I think in this case, it's I think Major Okoro. All those persons involved in all these operations, that failed operations, should be brought to book. As long as nobody is held accountable, as long as those persons that carried out those airstrikes are allowed to live a normal life as if nothing happened, that means people will continue to be murdered daily. So those persons should be held accountable. If they are held accountable, these killings will stop, or at least it will be mitigated. But
Emmanuel,
if that doesn't happen.
If I may, Emmanuel, do you believe there is a form of cover-up by the Nigerian military? Amnesty International referenced that 2 contradictory explanations were given They gave an initial statement by the Nigerian army, in Kaduna, and they said the airstrike was a mistake, and also a statement from Nigeria's defense headquarters claiming that suspected bandits had embedded with civilians. What they mean by that is that it's a collateral damage. What do you say to this?
I think it's sad that every year we spend billions of dollars of Nigerian revenue trying to actually empower the military to work better. But let me state it categorically, they have failed us. If lives, this is not one, this is not two, even during wars, if a number of persons are being attacked or killed, some of these wars actually are brought, there will be a need to carry out an intervention. This is not wars. This is not even in that situation, and it's happening regularly. That means there is something somewhere happening. I've also seen it on Monday. I also saw one of the news, one of the earlier news that came out that there was even a denial of even being attacked by the military in the first place. So if billions of dollars are given every time, that means intel should be something that normally they should have. And how will you be going to bomb people in Kaduna at that time? But meanwhile, the Northeast, where the Boko Haram and all these persons should or we have not been hearing this bombing. That is the areas that we're expecting to see bombing, not in areas where we know that it's highest communal clashes. And if there have to be intervention in those areas, it has to be the police, not bombing.
Well, according to the report, permit me to chip in there, Emmanuel. Reports say that it was an unmanned drone. Do you suspect the challenges happening regarding these accidental bombing to be, is it a hard skill challenge, is it a soft skill challenge, or is it even the equipment being used?
I would say both. There have been a lot of reports where reports and assumptions that most times even the equipment used are not the good equipment. People that are being contracted to get this equipment, that most times they fail to get the standard ones. So that means they are liable to fail when in the field. That is one. Secondly, this also clearly shows that the military lack capacity in a lot of areas. Let's not forget that most of these persons commanding such operations are, maybe when they came into the system, they had no use they were not really using tech as it's the situation now. So there will be need for capacity building of such persons, for them to empower them with the necessary skills to be able to carry out these things better. But I keep repeating, if the funds are being given to you and you have the capacity, because most time you keep hearing that they want to carry out a reorientation, carry out trainings and rehabilitation for Boko Haram. So if you are thinking about rehabilitation and all this, and still you are hearing this from you, it means to a large extent, it means they lack the capacity to do it.
One final question.
There has to be reorientation.
Okay.
There has to be a reorientation on their part.
Okay, one final question for you, Emmanuel. I like the fact you mentioned the need for capacity building by the Nigerian military, but then what would you say are the most pressing needs of the Nigerian army or even the Nigerian Air Force in terms of tackling insurgency in Nigeria?
First, I will talk about outside the capacity building I've stated earlier. There will also be need for an independent audit of the equipment being used. There have to also be an independent audit of those persons, just like Amnesty recommended about a group of persons being appointed to go and carry out inquiry, independent inquiry in this situation. But there have been a lot of independent inquiry. Nothing has come up and nobody has been brought to book. So outside capacity building and internal and external audit, thorough audit of the military, from the budgetary allocations to the equipment being bought, there will also have to be they have to hold some persons accountable. Those in charge has to be punished. Somebody has to be held accountable, at least for the first time, to serve as deterrent to other persons. So if this is being done, other persons will also learn. There have always been issues where military has been allowed to kill people naturally. It has been happening in Southeast daily. And
all right.
if this trend continues without anybody being held accountable and with trump-up charges of a mistake, even in countries that are not even considered at the level of Nigeria, you don't hear this sort of things.
And
So
we'll
I
have to
think
draw a close to that conversation. Thank you so much for your expertise, Emmanuel Ikule, security expert. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.